Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Wellness by Design. If you have a chronic condition, I know a lot of people in my audience do, then you're going to want to listen today because I have Ritamarie Loscalzo here, and I'm so excited to have her. Welcome, Ritamarie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you and your audience.
I'm really thrilled to have you here because you know a lot about something that I don't know a lot about and something I don't talk about a lot. So I think, but
Mhm.
it's very important. I know it's very important. So I'm going to tell people a little bit about you so they understand how credentialed you are. So I will go ahead and read your bio. So Dr. Ritamarie Loscalzo, an internationally recognized expert in nutritional endocrinology and founder of the Institute of Nutritional Endocrinology, trains doctors, nurses, nutritionists, health coaches, and other practitioners in the science of rebalancing hormones and restoring energy using nutrition and lifestyle approaches. I love that. As a doctor of chiropractic with a master's degree in nutrition and certifications in herbal medicine, acupuncture, and heart math, Dr. Ritamarie is passionately committed to transforming our broken disease management system into a true healthcare system where each and every practitioner is skilled at finding the root cause. Love that root cause of health challenges and uses the wisdom of nature combined with modern science to restore balance to the body. Ritamarie, I love all that. Man, you've got a lot of different hats that you wear.
Yeah, you collect degrees and certifications. I love learning. I love learning, but I also love teaching.
I get that. Yeah, I love that too. So, I mean, you've got your doctor of chiropractic, you've acupuncture, you got all these different things, and then pulling it all together. And I love what you do and in getting to root causes. Of course, that's what functional medicine
Right.
is, or I mean, really, what medicine should be,
What it should
right?
be. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's figure out root causes instead of masking symptoms.
Band-aids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
how did you how did your path take you to what you do now, which is the nutritional endocrinology?
Well, it started out with the failure of Western medicine to be able to help me when I was in my 20s with a whole lot of health issues that I was having sinus problems, headaches, brain fog before it was popular, gut issues. And I kept going from doctor to doctor, specialist to specialist, and I wasn't getting relief. So the last straw came when I was in the gastroenterologist's office. They just did a battery of tests, including what do you call them, barium enemas and barium swallows and all that kind of stuff. And he didn't find an ulcer, but he'd already put me on ulcer medication, right?
Ah,
This is like, why did you put me on ulcer medication if you think just because you thought I had an ulcer? So he confirmed I didn't have an ulcer. So I figured, okay, they're going to take me off the ulcer medication. And now what? What do I do? So I asked the question, well, what's wrong with me and what should I do? I'm glad I don't have an ulcer, but what do I do? And he said, I think you should just keep taking the ulcer medication.
makes sense. No.
So I'm like by trade a mathematician. I am computer science trained, and
Oh,
I've done a lot of diagnostic kind of work. And we didn't tell people to go do something to their computer because we didn't know what was wrong and to do something else, like rerun that program because we don't know what's wrong. And I went like, there's something wrong here. And I asked a question that I'd never pondered before. And I said, could it be my diet? He said, of course not.
no, it has nothing to do with your
Has
health.
nothing to do with your diet. Like, really? I'm like, okay, so maybe my headaches don't. Maybe my sinus problems don't. Maybe my brain fog doesn't. But my stomach problems, the food goes through there. Isn't there something related? So that's when I started out on my own quest and my own journey to find the solutions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm. Wow. So I get that, this with that science kind of mind because I was an engineer for so many years, and the
Mhm.
same thing. I found the same thing. It's like, okay, uh, like let's really figure out what the problem is here. We problem
Right.
solve. We go right back to the root of the problem and deal with
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. So you had a computer science background before you did all this
A
health stuff.
master's in computer science back in the day when I was first trained, when computers were these monstrous machines that filled up a room
Oh, yeah.
and we programmed them with punch cards.
Yep. Yep. I remember those.
Remember those days? So I've done that and I've always been a problem solver. As I grew up, I was always the one that could solve whatever problems were going on, really good at math. So I was a problem solver by design, but I didn't know enough about this hardware and the software that ran the human body
Mhm.
to be able to know. So I said, well, I have to learn this. So I started studying and taking classes, and I'm like, I need to go back to school to learn this stuff. And I need to be able to pull this together and help other people. And that started my journey.
Wow, I love it. And you really are helping so many people now.
Yeah.
So the title of what we decided to talk about today was about blood sugar.
Mhm.
And a lot of people with chronic illnesses, I mean, diabetes, yes, you think about blood sugar, right? But a lot of other people aren't necessarily thinking about it. And I know, like, for autoimmune, it is important, right? It can actually be a problem. And I've heard some doctor, like I really like Dr. Datis Karazian. You probably have heard of him as well. And I know he talks about, like, until you get the blood sugar right, you can't
get anything right.
Right. So let's talk about it. Let's just kind of start from someone who really doesn't know much about blood sugar and go from there.
All right. So blood sugar. So we eat food. The food gets digested, hopefully. The sugars and the starches, the proteins, the fats, and the vitamins and minerals all get put into the bloodstream. And I go like this because the gut lining has these little openings that are supposed to be perfectly suited to let those nutrients in.
Yeah.
And so those nutrients get into the bloodstream. One of them is sugar, glucose. And that glucose, in order to help us have energy and function on a regular basis, it needs to get into the cells, not just into the bloodstream. It needs to get into the cells. Right. So there's this hormone called insulin, and insulin latches on to the sugar, the glucose, and then escorts it into the cells. And once inside the cells, the mitochondria, these powerhouses in there, they'll turn it into energy. And then once it's into the cells, they can function properly. The liver cells can function. Your muscle cells can contract, relax, and get you places. So when we don't have balanced blood sugar, when there's a dysregulation of that insulin blood sugar mechanism where it takes the glucose and gets it into the cells, then you don't get the sugar into the cells. And what happens to that sugar when it doesn't get into the cells, it gets stored mainly around the belly, gets stored, plus that high level of sugar can cause damage. So as it travels around, this higher than needed levels of sugar can damage the retinas in the eyes. It can damage the peripheral nerves in fingers and feet. It can damage the kidneys. So it can lead to some really bad side effects. And I call the bad side effects blindness, amputation, and dialysis. And who wants that?
Right.
On top of those really severe ones, there are some other less severe but still pretty critical ones. What it does, that extra insulin and that extra blood sugar, especially the extra insulin, will stiffen those linings of the blood vessels. Mm-hmm. So as somebody needs to have a burst of energy and they're running the blood flow, the blood vessels can't contract, relax, and that can cause heart attacks and strokes, right? Yeah. When we look at insulin, blood sugar goes high, the insulin goes high. So they're both high. So we're suffering from the downside of both of those things, right? We can't get the sugar into the brain. So we suffer from attention problems, memory problems, things like that. And it affects all the hormones. We can't have good thyroid function when we have excess insulin and the blood sugar is dysregulated. And there's lots of studies to show this, right? So it's really critical for just about every system in the body. And we need to get it under control. And the good news is it's easy.
So what causes it? I mean, I know, but what causes it to go out of whack in the first place?
Well, what causes it, remember I said earlier, the insulin needs to carry the glucose into the cells. If you have been having a lot of sugar and a lot of glucose, and I don't just mean eating table sugar, there's a lot of healthy foods that cause elevations of blood sugar, including starches, breads, pasta, those sorts of things. What happens is the receptors on all the cells that accept the insulin and carry the glucose in, they get damaged, they get tired, they get resistant. So we have a condition called insulin resistance.
Right.
And the problem with insulin resistance is it's not just a problem right before it turns into diabetes. There's a several decades long progression where you can isolate and determine if this is going on early on and correct it.
Right. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how people would know if they've got a problem with insulin resistance, that those early stages of it.
So here's the thing about that. Those are symptoms that often happen just like people think they're normal. Brain fog, can't remember where the keys are, memory problems, right? Issues with fat around the middle. They think it's just because I'm getting close to menopause or whatever. No, it has to do with the level of sugar in the blood and the fact that we can't get it into the cells, so it's got to get stored somewhere. The sugar has to come down, or serious side effects, as we talked about. What else? Hunger, even after you've eaten a big meal. Do you ever notice that? Like, I just ate a big meal, but I'm hungry. I need more. I need something sweet. I need a piece of bread. I need a cookie, right? That is a good symptom. That exhaustion that you have in the first thing in the morning that doesn't really get relieved throughout the day, or that 4 p.m. slump that everybody thinks is normal, it's usually related to insulin resistance. So those are some of the major symptoms. Belly fat, I call it belly fat, brain fog, and burnout.
Right. You know, another thing that used to happen to me, doesn't anymore since I've changed the way I eat, I used to get shaky. I would get shaky if I went too long without eating. And I really just thought, you know, my husband could go ages without eating and he wouldn't get shaky. And I thought, you need to eat more or something.
Right. That's what most people
I didn't
do.
realize it was me. My blood sugars were off.
We're off. Right. And here's the interesting thing. People think that when you get irritable and cranky in between meals, hangry, as they say, that it's because your blood sugar goes too low. What I've found more often than not, it's because the blood sugar is too high, but the sugar's not getting into the cells, not getting into the brain.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people just eat to bring it up. And you bring it up, but also that causes more insulin and then more insulin resistance. So over time, it's actually not the best approach.
Such a vicious cycle because you're craving the sugars, but you actually have too much sugar.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So those are some great signs people would know. What's the connection, Ritamarie, between autoimmune conditions and insulin problems?
Well, they can cause each other, first of all. So somebody who has an autoimmune condition, there's a lot of inflammation and the body's actually creating antibodies to attack itself. Right. Yes. And that inflammation can damage the cells, the receptors on the cells, not just for insulin, though, by the way. It could be for estrogen. It could be for progesterone. It could be for thyroid. So those cells get depleted. And autoimmunity, generally, there's a big stressor on the body. There's a leaky gut, which is a stressor in and of itself. There's stressors on the system. And those imbalances caused by those stressors create imbalances in the blood sugar, right? So we need to get the autoimmune under control to help the blood sugar. But when we have blood sugar imbalances, we're up and down, the body gets dysregulated. So the inflammatory processes get dysregulated. We end up with more inflammation than we need, which propagates and exacerbates the autoimmune.
I know this might be a little aside, but what's your first recommendation? Is it heal the gut first, like get that under control first?
It varies with the person. So first of all, I say, let's define the problem. Right. So I recommend people get a blood sugar meter and monitor their blood sugar in response to various meals, in response to exercise, in response to stress. And you want to know the monster. You want to understand the monster before you can get rid of the monster, right?
Yes.
And so some people, it might be the leaky gut, and we have to get that under control. If they've already worked on that, it may be some other places. You want to look at heavy metals. You want to look at emotional stress. But the biggest thing is looking at the diet. because
Yes.
just about everybody in this country, in the Western world, has dietary stressors that they're not admitting are problems, right?
Hmm.
The excess sugars, the excess starches, the insufficiency of micronutrients because people aren't eating enough vegetables and fresh
Yeah.
produce. Uh, they're not getting the right fats because they're fat phobic and they're eating fake food that's missing fats, but they're not getting their omega-3 fats. So it's
Yeah.
really the diet is super, super important, but also stress. We live in a society where somebody's trying to get you stressed out 24/7, right? You
Yeah.
watch the news, you watch movies, everything is trying to get you stressed. And when you get stressed, it raises a hormone called cortisol.
Yeah.
Cortisol's job is to keep you safe from hungry tigers and bears.
Yeah.
And so, how does it do that? It helps you to run away from them. So, what you do is you produce sugar from whatever stores you have. So, it mainly likes to go to the liver and break down glycogen, go to the muscles, break down glycogen, and also go to the muscles and break down protein, which can then be converted into sugar so you can run away. The sad part is we're not running anywhere. We're sitting at our desk typing away. We're sitting at the TV eating, but we're not, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Making it worse.
it's an old response to a new problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And the sad thing is that, all these chronic diseases have become so prevalent, and it's
Mhm.
not that we have changed. Our gene pool
No,
really
our gene pool hasn't changed.
hasn't
Our
changed.
physiology hasn't. Our
Right.
biochemistry hasn't.
Yeah.
It's what we're doing. The
Yeah.
external factors, the stress levels, the
Yeah.
food, the environmental chemicals, the food chemicals, all
Yeah.
that stuff is really
All
killing
those
us.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to say, if there are people watching or listening that have questions, go ahead and type them into the comments, and we can answer them. Really love having questions. So if you have any questions for Ritamarie, go ahead and ask them.
Great.
Okay, so we want to talk about hormones, and I know insulin is a hormone, right?
Right.
And cortisol, is that classified
It's a
as a
hormone.
hormone
Oh
as
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Yep.
So, are there any other hormones you want to talk about? Because we were talking about blood sugar and hormones.
Yeah, and thyroid, biggie, right? And
Mhm.
you know, back in the day when I was in school, we were told that hypothyroidism is a rare condition. You're not going to see it very much. Yeah. Well, today it's like a household word. Everybody knows what hypothyroidism is.
Yeah.
And yeah, so why is it there? Well, we have these blood sugar fluctuations up and down and up and down, and the poor thyroid can't get the right signal on the energy, right? The mitochondria are not working properly. So that's big. What happens with the insulin elevations? We get an increase in inflammation. And
Mm.
so the thyroid receptors on the cells actually get damaged from the inflammation.
Yeah.
Also, when we have this problem with insulin dysregulation, we're not getting all the nutrients in. And so those receptors on the thyroid need vitamin A and vitamin B12 and folate. And with the average person not eating any fresh vegetables to get folate from, so that can be a problem as well. And then, of course, the stress of blood sugar up and down increases cortisol levels, and cortisol damages the thyroid receptors. Cortisol also inhibits the conversion from T4 to T3, and T3
Yeah.
is the active thyroid hormone. And unfortunately, in Western medicine, they're not trained to look at the T4 T3 ratio and help you to bring up your T3. They just give you more T4 if they find that they think you have a thyroid problem. So all of those things are connected. There's
Yes.
other interactions, especially at menopause, where the insulin elevations and the sugar, and it has to do with estrogen. So the estrogen interferes with the blood sugar, but the blood sugar interferes with the estrogen, especially uptake in the brain.
So much going on, and it
Mhm.
it might seem to people listening like, where, like, what do I even do? So the first step would be, look at diet, would you say? And
Absolutely.
stress?
Diet and stress and sleep. That's the other thing.
Mm,
Because of the stress, people aren't sleeping properly because of the blue light, that is going in and they're sitting in bed on the telephones or watching TV up until late at night. That's interfering with a good night's sleep. And sleep is critical for insulin resistance reversal or improving the sensitivity of those cells. Lots of studies on this, that even one bad night of poor sleep can affect the insulin sensitivity in a healthy, normal person. Now, it can be reversed pretty quickly if it's just one bad night, but you add that up week after week, month after month, year after year, and we're in trouble. So those things are mainly important. The other things I find super important has to do with the timing of meals. Most people are not taught that you really need big space between it. And you and I were talking a little bit about SIBO before. When you have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, you need to spread your meals out, or else the motility, what's called the migrating motor complex, doesn't work. Well, similarly, with the problem with insulin resistance, if you're eating all the time, your baseline level of insulin goes up, which is more likely to cause resistance, because it's like, like a kid, when you keep yelling at the kid, they just tune you out. The same thing with the receptors, right? Yeah. So we've really got to look at this as a big picture. So the timing is important, not eating too close to bed. And how many people do you know? I know they sit on the couch munching on chips or whatever, drinking a beer right before bed, and then they don't get a good night's sleep because of it. There's a lot of factors in there. And then the timing again, constantly in insulin mode, which means you're going to develop resistance, but also insulin is a fat storage hormone, not a fat burning. So if you're trying to get your weight to the normal level, ain't going to happen as long as you have insulin in your system.
So many pieces to the puzzle. Absolutely. And a lot of people, I think, just don't really realize how bad they feel. And with a few little tweaks, they could feel so much better. I'll give you an example. Like we're used to now intermittent fasting, we eat supper at 6, that kind of thing. We had like a Christmas event recently on the weekend, and we went out and, we didn't eat until after 8 p.m. It was crazy. And I ate stuff that I wouldn't normally eat because, well, there wasn't stuff that I normally eat on the menu. And I even had a dessert with sugar in it. Well, I could feel my heart racing that night, could not get to sleep. And then I wear an Oura ring, so I could really see what it did to my respiratory rate, to my heart rate variability, my sleep quality, all these things. And the next day, my husband and I both had brain fog.
So, hangover, right? Sugar, timing, hangover.
Yeah. So, we didn't realize before that we probably felt like that a lot of the time, but just like thought, this is it. Oh, getting older sucks.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be like that.
No.
So, I think what you're suggesting there, some of those suggestions are great about just tweaking these little things that they don't seem like they'll have a big impact, but they really do, especially multiple different ones, and we were told for so many years to eat frequently, snack, to keep up your metabolism. And it was all wrong.
Right.
So wrong. Yeah. So, okay. We've talked about the hormones. We've talked about what we didn't talk about was, measuring blood sugar, because if you aren't diabetic, I know for me, it wasn't that easy to convince I live in Canada. So, we kind of have to go by the rules, and, it's not like, well, I want a blood sugar meter and I'm going to have one. It just doesn't happen that way. I could manage to convince and make a convincing argument that I suspected. So I got a blood sugar monitor, and so I could test it. As it turns out, it wasn't an issue for me. But, and I know some people and I would love to have one of those continuous monitors. Like, what do you think of that?
I think they're amazing. And you're in Canada, and I envy you, because you can go to the local drugstore and just buy them off the shelf. You don't need a prescription. In the US, we require a prescription. In Mexico, you don't need a prescription. In Europe, you don't need a prescription. And they're amazing because it gives you a really good sense of what your sugar and your stress do. Most of the people that I see that buy a glucose meter and then say, oh, it's not a problem, don't know the correct way to test. That's another issue. You've got to test at certain intervals. You've got to look at it. With the continuous meter, you don't have to remember to test all the time. It's just there. You just have to remember every 8 hours or, 6 to 8 hours to, you hold your phone up, right? This is all that it takes to test your blood sugar. No blood, no poke, no needle. You just go like this and you go like that. And it right through my clothes. I don't need to have a bare arm. And it tells me exactly what my blood sugar is. And then afterwards, if I missed like a time in between, I could see the graph of what happened between the last time I tested and now. So they're wonderful. I don't know about Canada rules with the meters, where you poke your finger. I don't have one here, but where you poke your finger and then you jot it down. Here in the States, you can go to any Walgreens and for $10, $15 or Walmart or any place like that, and you can get one. And the strips, you can get them so you don't need a prescription. So maybe it's the opposite in Canada and the US for that. But I think measuring and learning how to measure is really important. And then the other thing you mentioned, intermittent fasting, is figure out your ideal fasting window. How long is it? Are you a late faster or an early faster? Personally, I'm an early faster. I start to eat usually around 2 in the afternoon, and then I eat and stop eating at 8 o'clock at night. That works well for me. Sometimes I like to go to a party and then I'm later and you feel a little more tired. But finding out what those windows are is really important, and finding out what the trigger foods and emotions and exercises and sleep has to do with what happens in your glucose. And when I talk about peak, basically we have a baseline. And most people go, I went to the doctor and my fasting glucose was 95 and he said I was normal. I'm like, that's not normal, first of all. Should be in the 80s or less. But second of all, that's just your fasting. And we know that the body does not have that shift as quickly as some of the other parameters. So the fasting glucose is one of the last things to shift. And unfortunately, because that's what Western medicine uses to predict the tendency to diabetes, they miss a lot of people that they could have helped if they'd done some other testing earlier on. So people go, oh, fine, I went to the doctor, my fasting glucose it's 95, or even if it's 82, you may not be fine because it could be shooting up to 150, 60 in between meals. And I found that to be the case. I always had perfectly normal fasting blood sugar. But after I ate certain foods, some healthy foods like pineapple, rice, things like that, went way up to 160, 180. Very healthy levels. And when it goes up that high, you're putting yourself at risk for dehydration.
Yeah. I'd love to get one of those continuous monitors, because then you can really see how you're reacting to what you're eating.
I know people up in Canada, and they say you just go to your local pharmacy and you buy one off the shelf.
I gotta look for that around here. Now I'm in Newfoundland. Lots of times we,
maybe it's
don't have things here. But I know I tried to order one from the States, and they said they couldn't send it.
Oh no, the States won't send you anything.
Right.
The States won't send any of us anything unless you have a doctor's prescription. And your doctor's prescription in Canada won't get you one in the States. Right. So you have to just go to the store and buy one. And if they don't have it, you ask them. It's what's an Abbott Labs Freestyle Libre. I don't have a rep. I'm not a rep. I don't get anything from that, but they're really the only one that's good to do for the average person. Like there's another one called Dexcom. Great if you're a type 1 diabetic, but it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So
can you say the name of that one again?
Abbott Labs Freestyle Libre. Freestyle Libre, Libre.
Okay, perfect.
And if they don't have it at your local pharmacy in Canada, just ask them to order one for you.
Okay, I'm going to do that. All right. I know that you've got a gift for our listeners and viewers to download, and it's your hormone hacking breakfast menus.
Yep.
So I'm going to share the link, but you want to talk a little bit about that, what it is?
It's a book that maps out the ideal structure of your breakfast. And when I say breakfast, I mean first meal of the day. So if you're an intermittent faster and you don't eat your first meal of the day until 2 o'clock, you still want to follow these guidelines because it's set up to keep your blood sugar steady, to keep your ketones in a good place, and to keep your energy steady. And so it's 5 components of a healthy meal for breaking your fast. And there's some recipes in there and menu guidelines and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, there's the link. So it's the hormone hacking breakfastmenus.com.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. So good. All right. I got one last question. But before I get to that, is there anything, Ritamarie, that you wanted to talk about or tell our audience that we didn't cover yet?
I would just say, do not take your doctor's word for it that you don't have a blood sugar imbalance, and ask for the right testing. If you're suspected, if you have these things, get a blood sugar meter. But if you suspect it, make sure they run a hemoglobin A1C, which normally they only run on diabetics, and fasting insulin as a starting point, right?
Okay.
And figure out how to, find somebody who can help you read that. We have programs that help people to understand and read those.
Okay, that's really great advice. Okay, so my one last question I always ask is, what's one action someone could take today to improve their health? What would you suggest, Ritamarie?
Oh, one action they could take today to improve their health. Really pay attention to what you're eating. Make a decision that nothing tastes as good as healthy feels, and that you're going to eat as healthfully as you can. And here's the thing, you don't have to deprive yourself. No way do you have to deprive yourself. You can eat really healthfully, but make a decision that you're going to do that.
I love that. Making a decision to eat food that's worthy of you, really, right?
That's worthy of you. I love that. That's perfect. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ritamarie. It's been such a pleasure having you on here and all this great wisdom that you've got to share. Thank you so much for being on Wellness by Design today.
My pleasure. This was fun. I love talking about this topic and inspiring people to be as healthy as you possibly can be.
I can tell you're so enthusiastic. It shows through. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for watching and listening. And we'll see you on the next episode of Wellness by Design.